I'd like to show you what happens when you connect a client to the DDP server. To do that, we're going to use a tool that we created called DDP Tools. It's an NPM module, and it lets us connect to a DDP server using the command line and take a look at the messages that are being sent over the wire. So go ahead and install that tool if you'd like to follow along. I've got the Node Inspector Chrome Debug Tools on the right, and I created a simple application on the left, and it's just a server app. What it does is registers a callback that will get called every time a new client connects to the DDP server. And then I've gotten a reference to the server and then the first session that is in the sessions object. So this will drop us into the debugger right here, and we can take a look at what happens when a client connects. Down in the bottom, we'll use the DDP tools to connect to this client or to this DDP server. So what I can do is type TDP, and if you need some help on what commands are available, just type it and you'll see all the help right below. But this time what we'll do is we'll just type DDP connect. And if I refresh the debugger on the right, that should drop us into our debug statement. Now what we're seeing down here are messages that are being sent by the server. And so notice the first message we get gives us the server ID. And then once we connect, the server sends back a message saying that we're connected. And here's the session ID that we'll be using. And so this is a unique ID that is unique to this particular client. Over on the right, we're paused in the debug statement, and I want to take a look at some of the scope variables, the local variables that are inside of this function. The first thing to note is that we have this connection, and it's been passed in as a parameter to our function, and it contains an object that has some information about the connection, like the original HTTP client address that was used and some of the HTTP headers, and then the ID for the current session. We can even register a callback to call when this session is closed. The second thing to look at is the Meteor server object itself. We've already seen this DDP server previously, but now I want to go into the sessions property and notice that we now have one connected client. We have a session, and the key is the ID for the session, and then its value is the session instance itself. So any kind of state associated with this client session is stored on this object, and you can see some of the things here, like whether or not the DDP message queue is blocked, what the socket URL is for this connection, the ID for the client, and so on. Here's the actual network socket for the connection with its associated properties. And if we scroll down a little bit more, we can see that there's a user ID. In this case, the user ID is null because we haven't actually logged in as anyone. Next, let's look at the prototype properties for this session. That'll show us the methods that we can call on a session object. What I want to draw your attention to is the methods that are available to send messages to the client. And so notice there's this send method here, and we can send a JSON message down to the client. And then we have send added, changed, error, ready, and removed. And these are different various messages that are used in the DDP wire protocol. So let's try that out in the console below. I'm going to call the send method on our session, and we'll send a regular JSON message by calling JSON stringify on an object. So we're not going to send a DDP wire message, and there's a couple of DDP messages that are part of the protocol. We're just going to send our own kind of random message, and it'll just say hello world. And when I press enter, notice over in the left, eventually that message will make its way to the client. It's a little slow because we're in debug mode, but notice we just sent a message from the server to our connected client with this hello world message, and we can send as many messages as we want. So now we have a persistent connection between the client and the server can send a message to this particular client by using its session object and calling the send method. Now there's a couple of DDP messages that are part of the protocol, and we can call their respective methods to send those specific messages. For example, when a document has been added and we want to publish that out, we can call the send added method and specify the collection, some ID, and then the actual fields for the document. Now this message that was sent down to the client is an official DDP spec message. And so notice the message key is added, and then we have a collection, the ID, and then the fields. And we can call the respective methods for changed or removed as well. So let me scroll down again and you can take a look. And notice you have different send messages for the various types of DDP messages that are part of the actual protocol, like changed, error, ready, and removed. Now what I've done is connected again, but this time I'm using a browser to connect. And so what I've done is taken the debugger console and detached it, and now we're just taking a look at the client-side debugger here. And on the right, we still have the debugger for the server. So I've connected and I've dropped into the onConnect callback. And notice now in the sessions object, I have two connected sessions. So this is the one that we created with the DDP command line tools, and this is the one that's just been created for the browser. And so we can expand that and take a look at the specific state that we're storing for this new browser session. So I'm going to press play, and now we'll take a look at the object available in the client as part of the client DDP package. So that's the DDP package. We have a DDP server that's running as part of your Meteor process, and then you have a DDP client. And we can pass DDP messages back and forth. And the client has code for processing messages that come from the server, and the server has code for processing messages that come from the client. And that's how we're able to get features like pub/sub and Meteor methods, or RPC.